Folks, my name is Mr. Perez. I am one of the AP Lang teachers here at Central High School, and I am recording this video to review some of the content we have been learning in week one of AP Lang. If you have any questions at all, or if there are any technical issues with this video, please let me know, and I'll be happy to try to fix those issues. This is very new to me, so try to stick with me through this. I'm recording this video for two reasons. One is for our students in my classes, period 6 and 7, who might need a refresher on some of these concepts before we move into more challenging and complex material. I'm also recording this for students in Miss Rensberg's class, so periods 2, 3, and 5, that might need a little bit of a refresher on these concepts. We are going over foundational concepts of AP Lang that will be really, really important for you to understand in order for you to be able to analyze complex pieces of writing. The next 2 weeks and beyond of this class is going to be moving right forward. We're expecting that you understand rhetorical situation, rhetorical appeals. And if you don't, this video is designed to be a refresher. I encourage you to take notes as you are watching this video, because I think those notes will be very, very helpful, especially if you feel like your first set of notes were not effective enough. Um, yeah, this next slide is specifically for Miss Rensberg, students in Miss Rensberg's classes. So I just want to reach out to you guys personally and let you guys know that Miss Hind and I are working our absolute best to create a system that will allow you guys to be involved in the curriculum and to give you the best education possible. So our biggest hindrance right now is that the Google Classroom is just not up and running. That is an issue that goes beyond our school. It is a district level issue. And so we're trying our best to get that to you guys. As soon as we do, I can start posting material to there that'll be easy for you to be able to review. We'll also be setting up AP Classroom very, very soon, and this can be a super, super helpful tool. The College Board are the ones who design the AP exam, and they developed a curriculum online that will be super helpful for you, especially if you don't have a physical AP Lang teacher in the room there to help you. I encourage you to use YouTube to reinforce material you learn in this class. A super cool thing about AP Lang is that it's a class that is learned by students throughout the country and other countries as well. So there's a lot of information on YouTube and other platforms that will help you. I particularly suggest Marco Learning and Garden of English, and they also have information for AP Lit. So if you like these platforms, you can use them to help you next year. I really just want to reiterate, guys, be very patient with us. Me and Miss Hind are two very, very busy teachers because we're very involved in the building. Miss Hind is the department head for the English department. She does a lot throughout this building. She is always, always busy. I, on top of teaching my 2 AP Lang classes, teach 3 sections of English 3. I am also a sponsor for a club here. I'm involved in the Hispanic Showcase. I'm an advisor in the Bridge program. I'm very, very busy, but I'm trying my best to give you guys additional instruction that might help you. So if you have any questions at all throughout this, I encourage you to email me. In fact, let me write my email down on here, so that way you are familiar. Oh, sorry, that way you have that email and you can reach out to me. Okay, I'm going to go through what we have been talking about for the first 3 days of AP Lang, and from there we will get moving. And I'll also talk to you about what you're going to be doing, at least what my students will be doing next week. And I'll talk to Ms. Hind about whether or not that will be the same thing that you guys are doing, but I'll give you an idea of what we are doing in our class. I really want to reiterate one last thing for Ms. Rensberg's students. All right. This is a very, very challenging, rigorous, fast-paced class. When Ms. Rensberg does get back, she's going to be expecting that you have been following along with the stuff we have been doing in class, because she can't, she's only going to have a limited amount of time. She's not going to be able to review this information with the same amount of detail that we have been doing throughout this time period. So this is very much so you're going to get as much out of this as you put into it. So yes, you are in a very, very difficult situation right now, but as long as you are continuing to work and to work on the provided things that we are giving to you, as long as you're continuing to reach out to me, um, you know, you'll be able to get to stay on track so that when Miss Rensberg does come back, you're not just reviewing old material, you're moving forward into more complex material that's going to help you for the AP exam. I want to start off first by just introducing myself. I think it's really helpful that you guys know that I am approachable. I don't want you to think that I'm a very scary person. I am a human being before anything else. This is my fourth year here at Central. Like I said, I'm a sponsor for HOU, Hispanos y Latinos Unidos. I'm advisor for Bridge. I love music. These are some of my other interests over here. It's some of the music that I love to listen to. So like I include this, yes, because it's silly, but also because I want you to remember that I am approachable. You can find me in room 226. So it's in the hallway just below Miss Rensberg's class. I have a Spider-Man poster on my door. You can't miss it. Come talk to me during advisory after school. Please don't come in while I am teaching. That's all that I ask. Okay, so on day one of AP Lang, we learned about something called rhetoric. This is the basic concept that this class is all about. Rhetoric refers to the art of using language persuasively and effectively to deliver a message to an audience. And meaning that this is not something that it's not a skill that you are born with. It is something that you develop over time that you need to practice like you would practice a sport. It's about using language, so words, text, things like that, persuasively, so to convince or persuade somebody of something, and effectively, so in the most efficient way as possible, you are delivering a message to a particular audience. That part is super, super important. A lot of what we are doing this week and moving forward is thinking about how our audience and our context shapes the message that we are delivering and um, how that message is constructed, how it is written, and also how it's received by that audience. To give you an example of this, on day one of my class, we did the sell this pen activity. It's very, very simple. Students were given 5 minutes to come up with a pitch for a pen that they were going to sell to their classmates. We kept in mind the rhetorical situation, and we'll talk about that in a second, the rhetorical situation of what you are doing here, right? Rhetorical situation, that's the context, the evidence, sorry, not evidence, the environment around which a text is written. In this case, the environment, we're keeping in mind, what is your purpose? That is to sell a pen, to stand out among all the other groups that are selling pens by making yours different and unique. Your audience are other AP Lang students. So how are you going to convince other AP Lang students to buy your pen? Lots of students, you mentioned the fact that AP Lang students need pens in order to write, not only for this class, but also for other classes. So they brought up some of the things about AP Lang that might require a particular type of pen. Some students brought up a pen that would connect Bluetooth to your head and track your thoughts down, because sometimes it's hard to connect what you're thinking to what you are writing. A lot of that stuff, we're thinking about how our audience, our context, influences the message that we are delivering and how that message is constructed. Um, Keep in mind that so my students stood up and gave this pitch to their classmates because it made sense for this context. But if you did that same exact pitch and you tried to sell your pen to your other classmates in your chemistry class during the fifth week of school, you like contextually, that's not going to go well for you. You're going to be asked to leave that class. I hope you get the idea. Context, audience, purpose, these things matter to how a text is written, how it is delivered. Here is a little infographic for you, right? Speaker, audience, purpose, those all are circling around the subject, influencing one another, influencing the subject or the message and how that is presented to our audience. This is called the rhetorical situation, right? That is a set of circumstances surrounding a text that shape how that message is delivered and received. On our day two, we'll get to that in a moment. We'll talk more about the acronym that we use for the rhetorical situation. The acronym is called SpaceCat. We'll get into that in just a second. But what's most important to keep in mind here is that the rhetorical situation of a text, the environment around which the text is written, shapes that text. That is super, super important. So knowing that, I'll give you an example in a moment. I want to talk about, actually, let me just change gears for a second. Um, in my class tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. And it's really, really important that we consider the rhetorical situation to think about some of the decisions that King is making in this speech. So, for example, we know that King, as a speaker, is a prominent civil rights leader. We also know in particular that he is a reverend. That means that he's a Christian religious leader that is really, really important to him. So we know that when there are moments in this essay where, and you notice how much annotation I've done on this, you'll notice that when there are moments where King is referencing the Bible or referencing biblical stories, he's doing that because he is a reverend. When he's speaking to other reverends in something that we're going to be reading next week called Letter from Birmingham Jail, he makes several allusions to the Bible because he knows that that is going to click with his audience, which are other religious leaders. Um, the main important thing to keep in mind, right, is that and I'm going to go down a little bit, the text environment, the speaker, purpose, audience, context, and exigence are always going to influence the writer's decision. So space influences CAT. Let's actually get into that for a second. All right, space CAT is the acronym that we use for analyzing the rhetorical situation of a text. AP Lang has a lot of acronyms within it. You're going to learn a lot of acronyms this year. You're going to learn even just in this video, SpaceCat and ACEs. SpaceCat is what we use to analyze the rhetorical situation. It stands for, as this image over here says, speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence, and then choices, appeals, and tone. You're going to see that space and cat are separate. That is because space refers to the text environment, whereas cat refers to the writer's decisions. That's usually even the idea of space cat in general. This can get a little grim for a moment, but stick with me here, right? If you take an everyday cat and you put that cat into space, into outer space, that is the environment surrounding the cat. That environment is going to shape and influence the cat itself in particular, because that cat cannot survive in outer space. We don't got to get into grim details of what that's going to mean, but the space influences the cat, right? The space affects the cat. In this case, the text environment affects the writer's decisions. Understanding who wrote the text or who they are writing it to helps us understand the decisions that they are making when they are writing the text. I hope that my space cat, like the cat in space analogy, made sense and that it also was not too grim. I apologize if it was. So let's get into space cat for a second here. Okay. When we look at space, that stands for speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence. For speaker, we want to think about who wrote this, what do we know about them, what don't we know about them, and does this text have a particular meaning because of who wrote or said it? We just want to think of the things that the speaker values, cares about, or believes, right? Martin Luther King, for example, it's really important that we understand that this is a civil rights leader. It's really important that we understand that he is Christian and that is a big part of his identity. He is young. This seems pretty obvious, but it's pretty important that we understand that he is Black, and he's Black living in the 1950s, 1960s during the civil rights movement, right? These are really important things. Um, if Martin Luther King gives the I have a dream speech, it makes sense for him. However, if Abraham Lincoln gives that same speech in 1864, 1865, it's going to have a very different meaning if he's the one who's saying it, because while he's, yeah, the president of the United States during the Civil War, he's not a civil rights leader. And he's not, like, understanding the speaker is super important. Think about this, right? If a president gives a speech, that speech is going to be unique to that president. Imagine if you saw a random dude on the street giving the same exact speech that the president gave. That speech is going to mean something very different, because we have a guy we've never met before versus the literal president of the United States. We trust that the president of the United States is saying something that is of value that we want to take into consideration. They have a certain level of authority that just a dude on the street does not have. These things are really important to thinking about the text that is being written. Okay, up next we have purpose. What is the speaker trying to achieve? What are they trying to persuade their audience about? What are they trying to inform? What are they trying to explain? Things like that. The message is not the purpose. The message of I Have a Dream is I have a dream that we will one day move past this racial division within our society, that we can create this new society that is, more racially equal, more racially tolerant. That is not his purpose, though. His purpose is to convince the audience, convince everyday people. Sorry, his purpose is to convince the audience, which is the people in front of him, um, in Washington, D.C., and to convince the Congress people who are listening to this and convince all of America to believe in his message, to believe in his vision, and to take action on it, to pass civil rights legislation, right? Like, message is different than purpose. That's essentially what we're talking about here. Okay, audience. This is super, super, super important. Our audience is who the text is directed to. To who is the text directed? Um, what's really, really important to keep in mind is not only should we be thinking about okay, let me keep it simple for a second. The audience, we got to think about what they care about, what they value, what is important to them. So, in the case of Martin Luther King giving the I Have a Dream speech, the people in front of him who are at that march, at the March on Washington for Jobs in 1963, those people are there because they care about the dream of racial unity, of racial progress. They believe in this message. They may differ in how to get to that point, right? We know the difference between Martin Luther King's vision versus Malcolm X's vision versus differing visions of how to get to that goal of racial unity, but they all believe in this common goal. So we want to think about, generally speaking, what does our audience believe in? What does our audience value? What does our audience feel? What do they want? And it's also important to look at how they differ in those important ways. How do they differ? There's another important thing. There can be more than one audience. In fact, there is usually more than one audience, especially with a speech. So here's an example with the I Have a Dream speech. Yes, his primary audience, his major audience are the people in front of him. I want to see if I can pull up a picture here. All right, I Have a Dream speech. Um, let's go to Google Images. Okay. Look at all of these people in front of Martin Luther King. That is who he is speaking to. That is his intended audience. Those are the people who showed up for that march, who, like I said, believe in this vision of racial unity. That is his intended audience. His secondary audience is everybody else in America who is listening to this message. That can be the people in Congress who are, discussing and debating civil rights legislation. It can be everyday Americans around the world watching this on TV, who, you know, um, have their own very, very diverse views on racial unity and on racial progress. Martin Luther King knows that when he is speaking to the people in front of him in Washington, D.C., he's also speaking to all of America at the same time. And he has to tailor his message simultaneously to both of those groups of people. That's what we mean when we say that there's a primary audience and a secondary audience. So, to whom is the text directed? Again, actual audience, intended audience. What does the speaker assume about their audience? And then what are the values, beliefs, and assumptions, biases of the audience? Okay, here we go. Context is going to be the last one we're going to talk about in detail. Context, very simply, what was going on in the world at the time that this text was produced? Guys, I Have a Dream speech means something very unique to the civil rights movement. This same speech would mean something very, very different today because life in America today is very different than what it was in 1963. If a different person, again, if Abraham Lincoln gives a speech during the Civil War, it means something different. If Queen Elizabeth gives this speech in the UK, if you see this speech on a TV show, it means something different because the context is super crucial. You cannot separate the context of a text from the the situation in which it is given. That's super, super important. Even given the fact that contextually, very, very specifically, right? This is a speech that he is giving at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It is a speech that he is giving in front of hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, I believe. he is tailoring a speech to that context. It's also, I want to make sure I have this correct. This is happening 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation goes in. That is important context. The fact that it's been 100 years since slavery was abolished is very critical context for the text that we are reading. So, very, very important to consider is context. Exigence is a very complicated idea. We're going to get more into exigence next week when we look at Letter from Birmingham Jail. Again, I am assuming and hoping that you all are following along with my class's curriculum. We will be doing Letter from Birmingham Jail next week. But exigence is related to context, but it's its own unique thing. Okay. So ideally, you guys watched the two McDonald's commercials. Ideally, you saw how the context of each of those commercials um, is very, very important to the commercials themselves. The Super Bowl one, it is 30 minutes, sorry, 30 seconds quick. It is intended to be played at the Super Bowl. The audience is watching a football game. They care about football. They want to be entertained. They're maybe hungry because they're watching the Super Bowl, right? That is super, super important to the audience here. Whereas you take it 3 months later, May 2020, middle of COVID, right? The context is different now. The audience cares about new things. They care about health and safety and the well-being of their family members. They are afraid to leave the house. They haven't dined out in months, probably. It is a very, very different context. So that's why we see two very different commercials. The decisions, the choices that were made in that. I'm going to go back to the Space Cat thing. The choices and the decisions that were made in those commercials the um, were influenced by the environment. They were influenced by the audience, by the context, even if the speaker is the same. And that changes the purpose too. The purpose of the Super Bowl commercial is to show you, hey, we got all these really, really cool meals, all this really, really good food. You should, if Travis Kelce loves this, if Kim Kardashian loves this, if Patrick Mahomes loves this, you should too, right? That is unique to that audience in that context. However, the choices that were made in the COVID commercial, the very different tone, the slower pace. It's about a minute 30 seconds. The emphasis on graphics and on showing you what the kitchens look like, right? Those are unique to that commercial's context. If those commercials were swapped and we watched the COVID one at the Super Bowl, it would not make any sense at all because COVID was not a pandemic by that point. It was February, but the pandemic really kicked into gear in March. Similarly, if McDonald's played that commercial that they played at the Super Bowl in the peak of COVID, it's going to come across tone deaf. It's not relevant to that context. Okay. All right. So here's Wednesday. Guys, I am running a little bit low on time. So I'm going to talk about the Wednesday stuff at a different time period. This is about writing in AP Lang. This is also super, super important information, but I don't have enough time to go into all of this right now. I'll record a second video where I'm going to go over this writing information, and we're going to be using those commercials that we talked about in order to help us with this. I want to reiterate some of the things I talked about at the beginning of this video, right? It is super important that you are just patient with myself and Miss Hind. We are trying our best to keep you all involved in the curriculum. I know that Miss Hind is trying her best to have my students, peer mentor with your students in order to, um, you know, connect both of our classes and make sure that you guys are involved in the curriculum. If you have any questions, you know that you can email me at tperez2@villasd.org. You know that you can stop by my room in room 226 during advisory or after school. Please, just not during class. Please, please, please. All right. Use YouTube to help you. Guys, AP Lang in all AP classes, the fact that there is an online community for these classes is truly a blessing. It has helped me learn a lot to be able to teach this class effectively. And if you use those to your benefit, it's also going to help you too. If you have any questions, please, please, please come talk to me. I am here to support you guys. Yeah. So let's make this a great year. If you have any questions, just come talk to me. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.